a lot of times I hear atheists, more activists, they talk about how they struggle with their family, they're afraid to come out, which I totally get, because I understand how some people are. Now, in the past about 4 years, I've kind of immersed myself in the atheist culture. I guess I don't know if I want to say that, because there's all different breeds, but
that's true.
That's my drift. Yeah. Well, every time if I go to a conference, a convention, a speaking engagement, I attend these as a theist, not to interrupt, stand up, and throw my Bible at people's faces. I want to have a conversation after it's over. After the event's over and people are mingling, talking, whatever, I love having the talks.
Sure.
And as soon as I'll chat with people, I'll talk with people, everything's laughing and fun and good and everything, until I mention I'm a theist. And then things get awkward.
Sure.
You know,
how can I be less awkward than having these conversations?
Well, I guess it entirely matters. It seems to matter who you talk to, because I agree with you that there's a wide variety of unbelievers, just as there are believers, and there's a lot of people whose tack is not good, and a lot of us, you know, will have good and bad days too. I mean, because sometimes I excel, and sometimes I'm just not up to the game, and somebody else should take over, I guess. But I'm always looking for that conversation myself. I want to come off to the stage. I don't want to talk to people who agree with me on everything. I lit up when Eric told me just now here at the table that he said he disagreed with me about something. I'm like, bring it, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, it's interesting, because I want, as much as anything, I want to be shown to be wrong if I am. So, and certainly I'm going to learn either way, right?
All right. I work at a church 6 days a week. I'm in an echo chamber. I throw on podcasts. I do like maintenance work in the church. I work evenings, throw my headphones in, and just straight listen to podcasts.
I know what you mean. I used to watch the Trinity broadcast channel just to get myself angry.
Well, yeah. Hey, I listen to you guys. I'm not going to bunch of podcasts drop now. We're trying to promote you guys.
I appreciate that. I know sometimes people hop in and they want to super self-promote. But so I think two things. Number one, I'd love to answer that question. And number two, I'd love to get into at least a little bit of the kind of things that you want to talk about. So first, Aaron got it. There are a whole bunch of us, and some people are going to be up for talking, and not everybody will be, and some of us will be super up for talking. If you find me at a convention, the trick is you buy me a beer, we sit down, and we will talk for hours, because that's my jammy jams. That is why I'm here. I love that. And I suspect that Aaron does too.
I do, yeah.
And so just we're different. We're all different people, and some people have experienced a lot of pain from the church that they were in. They've suffered. Some people have lost everything, and they're not ready to talk, or they might never be ready. And that's something that that's okay. But there are those of us who are willing to talk, and so I think that you stepping forward and being forward about it, helps. Don't spring it on them like a trap, but being clear about what your intentions are and what you want to do means that people can be ready to talk about that kind of thing, because not everybody is. But what kind of things do you want to talk about? Why do you believe?
Well,
what do you believe? And if you watch this show a whole bunch, what are your answers to that? Because if you watch this all kinds, then what are we not getting that you are?
I don't necessarily know if there's anything that I'm getting that you're not getting. Why I believe, based on, experience, that doesn't hold much weight. See, I know most of the answers given don't hold much weight with someone that doesn't believe. Experience means nothing, because you can't experience what I've experienced.
I spent some time as a neo-pagan occultist, and I deceived myself into believing a lot. I saw things and heard things and felt things that it was a painful experience for me to realize that I remember these things happening, and to reconcile to myself that they didn't actually happen because they couldn't happen, but I remember them happening. Does that make sense to you?
That makes sense. Now, what would... No, try to look at it from a Christian or a theist or anybody else with that believes in a deity, their perspective. I hate to say atheists on one side, theists on the other side. I don't like, because if there is a God, I don't think he looks at people and says, hey, they're a Christian, they're a Catholic, they're a Protestant, they're an atheist, they're a Muslim. I don't think he separates, if there is one, which I agree there is.
And even if there isn't a God, I'm in the same boat with you in that I don't want to contribute to tribalist or dichotomies to categorize people.
So it sounds like your God is pretty loving.
Well, no, he can be a.
This is a baited question.
The word you use, your God, and
well, your God is different from the guy who called in earlier who had a definition of a God. We don't provide definitions for religious callers. We let them give us their definition so that we can speak to them and not a straw man of them.
Well, what is a very generic, broad definition of God?
The one I use, to my experience, looking at all of the gods that I'm aware of, I mean, you can't create by definitional fiat a definition of God that excludes the hundreds of gods that were worshipped by millions of people for thousands of years. So if you're going to describe what a God is, that has to be an inclusive definition that applies to every God that is universally accepted as such by its adherents or devotees. And so for me, that definition has been that a God is a magical, anthropomorphic immortal.
Would you agree with that?
Being?
A magic, anthropomorphic immortal as a descriptor of your God?
Something beyond. No, I can't say something beyond.
Well, beyond to my.
I don't know. I like the word. I just like supreme being. Supreme.
The supreme. So like Mila Jovovich in Fifth Element. I mean, you could do a lot worse.
If there, hey, thank you.
I know, right?
I'm married.
I'm not.
Go
ahead. And it's okay. It's okay to be attracted to people. Doesn't mean you need to act on. No, go ahead. Sorry.
You know, I mentioned this one to me the third time I bring this guy up. Where my friend who worships Bast. I understand why he worships Bast. She's the Egyptian cat-headed goddess. She's always depicted topless. If you're going to pick a god to worship, that would
you could do a lot worse.
You could do a lot worse.
But like,
if there was a being like that, like the Fifth Element, or if there was a being that had, if there was a person that had magical powers, they could be looked at as a god.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no problem with that. Something that's.
Which is why
something that hasn't been experienced yet. I mean, who knows? We could evolve into having a sixth sense.
Well, we have a lot more than five senses, but I get what you're saying in the colloquial use of it. The thing is even if we did develop to change our surroundings such that we developed another type of sense, that still wouldn't be magic because we could still explain that and it still exists in a naturalistic world. So where does this deity of yours fit? And
I still want to say that if magic existed, Obi-Wan or Gandalf or Spock would be able to demonstrate that. Even if science can't explain it, we've got a thing that we can't explain.
But right now we just have this nebulous deity. We haven't really pinned it down anywhere. Is there somewhere that we can like talk about its attributes?
Well, if it's outside of reality, my goodness, we're going to have a long conversation about reality too.
Well,
that often goes with the territory, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, what is reality? Like your reality and what you experience. I mean, reality is based off of experience. Would you agree with that?
No.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
And now I understand that pure empiricism.
My reality is different than your reality.
I could be wrong. I could be wrong about this, but as my understanding is that pure empiricism believes that everything that we know about reality comes only from our senses. But I would consider myself more of a rationalist in that I understand that there are devices that can perceive beyond what I can, and I also seek objective verification, meaning that it's not determined by my own personal experience, that I can confirm this with other people. This is on the assumption that other people exist. Yeah. Right? Because I think it would be the height of arrogance to assume that I have my own reality. I think I share a reality with a whole lot of other people.
Well, definitely, if it was my own reality, there would be a lot less people in it. A lot of people that I don't like would not be here.
If I was going to have my own reality, it'd be better than this.
Yeah, but I don't understand. I asked you to tell us where God exists and where God fits in, and you said, what is reality?
Yeah,
help me out here.
I'm sorry, it all ties to, okay. My perception of reality, when I use the word perception to identify me, only me, and say someone else's perception may be different. So when I look at the world or I look at my relationships, I perceive them in a certain way outside of the way they perceive me. Does that make sense?
Sure, but we live in a shared reality. So if you and I were to stand in front of a table, or if we were to look at this jar of gumballs that I'm holding up, and I was to say, this is a jar of gumballs, and you look at that jar of gumballs, look back on your past experiences with gumballs and jars, and agree that that is a jar of gumballs, then we're in agreement that it's a jar of gumballs. Even if...
There's an even amount in there, by the way.
You are a heretic and you'll burn. When we're talking about that, even the language that we're using is built on shared assumptions, right? So
can we agree that we both exist?
Can we? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. On the assumption that you and I both exist equally, then the reality that we both exist in, even if it's an illusion, it's still our reality. So even if this reality is an illusion, we still have to live by the rules. And if I find footprints on the beach in this reality, that means that in this reality somebody walked on that beach. So evidence still means something. So talking about whether this reality is real or not is more or less negated. Do we agree on that?
Okay. Yeah, I can agree with that.
Okay, so within the reality that you and I both know, what is your indication or understanding of your God?
Well, the cumulative case of all the traditional arguments that you've heard between the Kalam, the teleological, moral, all the arguments thrown together, do all of them together hold any weight at all?
No.
I mean, okay.
0 plus 0.
Yeah, if you build your house with nothing but broken bricks, it's not going to stand, even if you have a whole bunch of them.
Now, do you understand how those cases and those arguments can be compelling to someone else?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I was not only once upon a time a Christian. As I mentioned earlier in the show, I was a neo-pagan. I was a Jedi. I believed all kinds of things. I once believed everything necessary to be a ghostbuster. I believed in spirit photography, astral projections, full trance mediums, the Loch Ness Monster, the theory of Atlantis, all of that.
And there wasn't even a steady paycheck in it for you.
And I bragged, because I was raised in a culture that you're supposed to brag about your faith, right? I bragged that I was so credulous that I believed in all these things. I know how easy it is to convince yourself of these sorts of things. And that's the reason that I became so skeptical, as I realized in a critical moment in my neo-pagan career, I realized that I was not actually showing people things that really exist. I was creating an illusion that would align or sync with what they already believed. And so I could make people see things, hear things, feel things if they already believed. And all I had to do was use suggestion or ambiance. And when I realized the way the illusion worked and that it was an illusion, I realized in a moment that I wasn't just fooling them into believing this, I was fooling myself. And that was a harsh reality for me to look into, that I was doing things, I was performing rituals and such that were deceiving me.
Now, from the Christian perspective, that's exactly what we would expect you to say, because the very passage I'm sorry, I don't want to get all pastoral on you here.
No, go for it, because what you just said is essentially, well, I'm right, but really statement. You're wrong, and I'm going to write you off.
I'm sorry?
Was that just a very nice, I'm writing what you just said off?
What?
What Aaron just very eloquently and at length expressed to you about how he moved out of that kind of thinking and into skepticism because he cared about what was real, and because he realized in a moment of clarity that he was not getting to truth, right? That entire thing that Aaron just said.
Because from my perspective, both as a neo-pagan and as a skeptic currently, of course you would say that as a Christian.
Exactly. So, like, I agree. I totally agree.
We're making fun of that because it's ridiculous. Jared.
There's an impasse.
No, there's not. There's either a reality that we share, or there's something being broken up here. But for you to write that off and say, well, I have it different, then show us where you're different. Is it because you believe in the Christian God? Is it because you believe in the Bible? Is it because you had an Egyptian deity show up in your room? How do you come to that?
The fact that we can have evidence that there is reality, basically, I guess, appeals to the trees kind of thing.
Yeah. Look at the trees, therefore God.
Kind of, but
give him a moment. He doesn't have enough rope. He doesn't have enough rope to hang yet. Go ahead.
Well, that's fine. No. I might hang myself.
Well, hold on. No, because I'm not going to hang you. I'm just going to say that I'm your God. Because
you cut that off too short.
No. I don't want him to walk into it. I want him to know where he's going and then still walk there. Jared, go ahead.
The fact that there is a uniformity in age, the fact that that we're able to do science, we're able to. So there's order. There's an order in summary, because that if there's the least bit of order, the least bit of ability to understand the fact that there's rationality, the fact that if there is truth, which I heard a minute ago, you guys were talking about truth.
Yeah, but I have a definition for what truth is, and I'm pretty sure that my definition is accurate.
Well, hold on. That's going to take us down a rabbit trail.
No, it's not. No, I don't think it will. The truth is what the facts are, what we can show to be true.
And the
truth is not what we merely assert to be true. So if you can't show that it is true, then you can't say that it is truth. And for me...
Can you show me that that's true?
Yeah. Truth is,
how?
Because the typical definition of truth is that truth is that which is concordant with reality, which means that truth itself is not, it means that reality itself is not truth, but statements about reality can be truth if they're true, which means the criteria is that the statement has to be something we can show to be true, or we can't make the statement at all. We can't declare it to be truth. Otherwise, it's just an empty assertion, and an empty assertion has no more credence than a claim that has already been proven wrong. So if you make an assertion and you can't verify that it's true, you've said something that is equally invalid to a falsehood. You have to be able to show that there is some truth there. So what can you show that your perspective has truth to it?
Let me.
Well, we heard.
This is why.
We heard the uniformity of reality, right? I caught on to that one. I'm glad you noticed my work. I tried really hard.
Okay, we come by truth. I have to re-go through what Aaron just said. To come by truth is on facts. I kind of summarize everything, and I'm probably going to get it all wrong. But we come by facts. How do we come by facts?
A fact is just objectively verifiable data. It's something that is either not in dispute because we can talk about a hypothetical situation where we will both agree on a certain premise, or that certain in a case of certain details, then we can draw these conclusions. Those certain details we decide to agree on. This would be the facts of the story, for example, or of the hypothetical situation. Or otherwise, we can refer to a fact as not indisputable because it is objectively verifiable. So I may argue that the Bible says this, and you'll say that it doesn't say that. Well, I can open up the book and show, and if it says what I said it said, then I've demonstrated the fact. And if it turns out that I haven't, well, then I misremembered that because, our own personal memories and experiences are unreliable. So we need something that is objectively verifiable. We need to be able to go to the data. What does the data say? So we can establish what the fact is, and that has to be objective. It can't be, it can never be that it's true for me, or we all have our own truth.
Agreed.
That doesn't work.
Right.
When you use the word data, and like data and evidence, those, to me, I take them as scientific terms.
Yeah, they basically are. I mean, for me, and I realize that this is different for history, because history has a little different context on this, but generally in science, evidence is a body of facts which are positively indicative of or exclusively concordant with one particular position over any other available. Would you agree with that?
Can you repeat that? Sorry,
Yes, my definition
I'm a terrible Christian.
My definition of evidence is a body of facts which are positively indicative of or exclusively concordant with one position over any other available. Meaning it's a collection of facts that wouldn't. Okay, yeah. What I often get from some fundamentalists is they'll have, so we're both looking at the same evidence, we're both looking at the same facts. By definition, we can't both be looking at two mutually exclusive positions based on the same data. It's not a fact by itself is just a fact. It doesn't become evidence until it indicates that one or the other is correct. So we can't use the same fact to indicate that both are correct. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess kind of what you're saying is when you have two bodies you have the evidence right in front of you, two people come to two different conclusions. One's either right, one's wrong.
Yeah, and the analogy that I like to use, because a lot of people have difficulty understanding what evidence is, if you have been told that no one has ever been on this island before, as you pull your boat up to the island, you've been convinced because you've always been told nobody's ever been here, and as soon as you get up there, you see footprints across the beach, and they have the Nike label on them, and you're not wearing Nikes, okay? So you have that fact, the footprints on the beach, that fact indicates that somebody has already been there. And people would say, well, we're both looking at the same facts. Well, how can the fact of the footprints on the beach how can that be used as evidence that nobody's been here? Obviously, that can't be the case. Now, if the same fact would be true in either case, right, like who owns this property, well, that the Nike footprint would still be a Nike footprint regardless who owns the land, so that's not going to be, that fact is just a fact. It's not evidence of anything. Of either side of that argument.
In the analogy, if the assertion or the thing that I'm told, which would be, I guess, an assertion of that there was no one on the island, and I saw a Nike footprint, if I knew that as a fact that no one was on the island, and I saw a Nike true footprint, I would have to think if it's a fact, then I would have to come to the logical conclusion that that's just happened.
Like
if it's a fact.
Naturally?
I don't understand what you're saying. You're saying if you know it as a fact that nobody's been to that island and you see the footprint, right, you're going to discredit the footprint and assume that because it's not a fact that nobody's been to that island. Oh. That's the accepted premise. And the fact is the footprint.
All right, then if it's an accepted premise, then that's, yeah.
Yeah, it becomes, if it's objectively verifiable that nobody's ever been to that island, and I don't know how you would verify that no one's ever been to an island, but let's just say we'll need another analogy for that one, but yeah.
Yeah.
In order to know that no one's been on the island, you would have to have been to the island to know that no one was there in the first place.
And then you've been there, and then you disprove yourself.
Then, right.
Well, that was a fun little circuit.
So, I mean, but you actually said that you would take the fact that nobody, because you have the prior belief that nobody's been to the island, and when you see the line of footprints, you would discard that or ignore that and continue to believe that nobody's been to the island?
If it was a fact, yes, based on like satellite images or whatever, and it was observed 24/7 for the,
Wait. How many observers from
island.
how far away does it have to be? You pull up your boat to the beach, you see the line of footprints. I can see them too. I'm in the boat with you. We both see the footprints.
That someone's been there.
Exactly.
Because that is way more likely than the ocean randomly making, Nike footprints with the logo on the beach.
Now, we don't need satellite photos. We don't need 24-hour surveillance.
Well,
in the same way that when we look at claims of supernatural intervention, someone getting better after having gotten cancer or something like that, it's far more likely that they just went into remission because that happens than going that extra, that means that God heard and decided to intervene and do all of this. It's far more likely that you take the naturalistic answer because that is the one that you can actually test. Yeah, and that actually happens.
I usually argue with fundamentalists who want to argue against evolution, for example, and so they would look at the list of footprints and try to argue their apologetics for how one footprint doesn't lead to the other, or that those footprints actually imply what their position is, whatever that is, and that they're going to try everything they can to discard that and say that those footprints aren't evidence of anything, or they naturally occurred, or they're a hoax, or whatever excuse they can come up with. But you can see how unreasonable that is, right?
Yeah. I'm stuck back with, you said it's likely to be this way. Well, I see that it's likely to be probabilistic that there's a God. I'm not going to say I can prove a God. That's
what implies a probability there?
The collection of traditional arguments and the fact that we can do science. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I don't want to.
Well, yeah, there's the fact that we can do science, which implies that we can do science, which implies that we have a rationality. Now, what makes that extra jump to imagine that there was somebody else before our brains evolved that already had an evolved brain that designed our evolved brain and happens to look just like we do, so that we're made in the image of the thing that already existed before we evolved to look this way?
Well, that's a lot of steps to get the whole way there.
Right. So what I'm saying is we don't have any indication. There's not an argument to imply that what you're saying has any probability at all.
Well, the fact, rationale, where did rationale come from?
Rationale
let's
is what
imagine
we
for
use.
a moment. Let's imagine for a moment that we couldn't answer where rationale comes from. If we can't explain that, and we can explain that, but that's not the important thing right now. If we could not explain where that came from, when does our failure to explain something imply a God? If you don't, for anything, you find your keys in the middle of the kitchen floor. You didn't put your keys in the middle of the kitchen floor. You have no idea how your keys got in the middle of the kitchen floor. You've never been in this house before. You walked in this house for the first time, and your keys are in the middle of the kitchen floor. Does that mean a God did it?
It means there's a reason for it.
There's got to be a reason for it, and that reason's going to be natural, isn't it? That reason's never going to be God, right?
Because you'd have to demonstrate what that even would look like. And back to what you said, again, if you're building a house with broken bricks, that will not make a house, right? If I sum up all of the shitty arguments for the existence of a God that you can take and you can deconstruct and show why they're shitty arguments, then a whole bunch of them doesn't make them stronger.
I got to tell you,
it just makes them a bunch of shitty arguments.
I got to tell you, yours is a shitty argument. I can make a house out of broken bricks.
All right, so the walrus and the carpenter here are probably going to be ending pretty soon because we are low